So it's been a long time since we've had a Bleach character featured in one of these videos, so let's bring it back. I mean, the channel is called Bleach Hub after all, so in today's video, we're going to be taking Bankai Ichigo and pitting him up against Ikki. Now, you guys may have heard of Ikki. He's one of those characters that's really strong for his tier, and he may get stronger than I think in this video, as I've only seen the anime. I kind of want to do this as a little prelude to kind of expose a lot of people to this character because I think the show is really cool. It's basically like a Bleach type show because they all have their own quote-unquote Zanpakutos, these soul weapons, and they all have really interesting abilities that correlate with their quote-unquote Zanpakutos. You even have somebody in the show that's quite literally just Renji's Zanpakuto. They pretty much just have Zabimaru. If you've seen Chivalry, you know who I'm talking about, and that guy's pretty dope as well. So I was like, I want to do a versus battle between Ikki and some form of Ichigo because I think that'd be really cool, you know, like these two swordsmen going at it. It's just the problem is that Ikki and Ichigo have a hard time fighting each other because it's either Ichigo's too weak in the very beginning of the series or he's way too strong in the later parts of the series. And so I feel like doing Bankai Ichigo versus Anime Ikki keeps things pretty level between the two. Like there's no gank going on either side. Like it stays pretty fair. And this is also at the point of the series where Bleach had a lot of focus on the swordsmanship. Like the fights were a lot more grounded and they were more sword-based skill and all that kind of stuff. Whereas when you get to like the Arrancar saga and everything, they kind of just turn into Dragon Ball characters. There's still some really cool sword fighting, but it's definitely more prominent here in the Soul Society arc. So I was like, okay, Bankai Ichigo, or really just Ichigo from this arc versus Ikki. Who would win this fight? I think it's really dope because I think Ikki's kind of the underdog here because as we'll talk about in this video, he's definitely got the lower stats, but he does have some ways to maybe win this battle. So it's going to be really interesting. I'm going to change it up just a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and go over all of Ichigo's stuff first, and then I'm going to go over Ikki's stuff, and then I'm going to go ahead and come to the conclusion because these characters are both really easy for me to cover. I've been doing Bleach for like the last couple of years, so it really shouldn't be all that hard for me to cover just specifically Soul Society arc Ichigo, because I'm not going to argue things from like, oh, maybe he's like rock level, because this is like, no, we're just going to get to the nitty gritty of where he actually scales. So strap in, this should be a nice little fun video. If you guys have any other series that you want to see me compare Bleach to, let me know in the comments down below. You guys should have a pretty good grasp of the shows that I cover at this point because I pretty much make a video on everything that I've seen. So leave suggestions in the comments down below, especially if you want to see more Bleach mashups. Also, leave a like on the video, subscribe. That lets me know that you guys want to see more Bleach matchups. So if these videos do good, we'll pit more characters up against Bleach characters and see how our homeboys can actually stack up to some of the other animes and stuff out there. As I just mentioned, it's really easy to go ahead and just scale Soul Society arc Ichigo because we actually just have some pretty easy feats to scale him too. I mean, the most blatant, really good feat that you have in the Soul Society arc is Shikai Toshiro making this massive storm cloud that's actually calced at being Large Mountain. And pretty much anyone that's captain class should scale to this because it's literally just Shikai Toshiro. I mean, Gin's able to fend him off pretty easily in his Shikai, and if you really want to stretch and you need a direct route to it, even Shikai Ichigo, before doing a lot of his training, survived a hit from Gin. He was bleeding a little bit, but he didn't die. And then even someone like Izuru gets directly hit by Toshiro's Shikai, where Toshiro's like, you will die if you do not move out of the range of my Shikai, and then Izuru just straight up tanks that. That in and of itself should kind of show that it scales to a lot of people in the arc, but how about the fact that Byakuya is considered to be a peerless prodigy of the Gote 13, a member of the royal family, said to be this legendary status captain that is one of the most famous in all of the Gote 13, and yet Ichigo's not only able to contend with him in his own Shikai, but in his Bankai he literally speed blitzes and nearly one-shots him twice. There's also the fact that Bankai Toshiro gets one-shot by Aizen, Bankai Toshiro being 5 to 10 times stronger than his Shikai self. I even bring up the 5 times because he doesn't have a quote-unquote completed Bankai or mastered Bankai until the 1000-Year Blood War when he gets it stolen. But even then, you can draw the conclusion that Ichigo actually took quite a few hits from Aizen. In fact, the same time when Aizen tried to one-shot Ichigo, he literally said, huh, you should have been cut in half. but you're way more resilient than I thought. Keep in mind, this is an Ichigo post the battle with Byakuya, where he got possessed by Hollow Ichigo and literally diced up by Byakuya and fought until he quite literally had nothing left in him. So if these don't even show, I mean, from like how Byakuya is held in this high esteem and Ichigo can fight him in more of a high esteem than Toshiro, the fact that Ichigo is able to tank attacks way better than Toshiro can, and even if you wanted to say like, well, maybe that's just raw durability, maybe Ichigo just has better durability than Toshiro, that's all predicated on your spiritual pressure in Bleach, meaning that Ichigo's spiritual pressure has to be higher than Toshiro's, and thus he is stronger than Toshiro. So to say that Ichigo doesn't scale to this like large mountain level feat is absolutely absurd. And then as far as speed is concerned, if you go by the first arc of Bleach, Ichigo has a very casual speed of sound level feat where he blitzes Shrieker, but we can do way better than that with Shuhei being able to dodge the Negacion, which is literally said to be light. The calcs for Negacion put it anywhere from 5 to 10% the speed of light, and even though Ichigo is fast enough to blitz lieutenants and beat him up with their bare hands and blitz Byakuya, who is one of the fastest captains in the Gotei 13, let's say that Shikai Ichigo is only equivalent to this Shuhei who, mind you, just had his Ryatsu sucked out of him by Yumi Chika and is pretty much just barely standing. Let's say that they're equals. Even if Ichigo went into Bankai, that means he would be anywhere from half the speed of light to at bare minimum the speed of light. So to say that he's not at least approaching or is the speed of light is a bit absurd in this. But trying to use the data book where it says he moves like lightning is a bit absurd at this point. It's clearly meant to be hyperbolic. I mean, we don't assume that football players, when someone says, oh my goodness, he's moving like lightning, he's so fast, we don't assume they're running at the speed of lightning unless maybe your worldview is just that delusional and you actually legitimately do think that Peyton Manning is over here throwing the football at like 2 times the speed of lightning or something. That being said, there's another count that people are trying to do where he actually cuts all of Byakuya's Bankai petals. The only issue with this is that it's a bit inconsistent because there's too many variables to account for. It is likely extremely fast, and we're talking like dozens to hundreds of times the speed of light, but it is really hard to get a concrete calc on because there are actually just way too many variables to calc. But if you do want to go ahead and use that, I'm just going to let you know it's a little bit dodgy, but you can get him into like the tens of hundreds to even thousands of times the speed of light. But again, just use it at your own peril. It's a very hard thing to argue because in debates and when we're comparing characters, we want to be as consistent as possible, and it's kind of hard to do when you have a calc that has a lot of shaky variables. Now, as far as abilities that Ichigo has, unfortunately, this is kind of the weak part of Ichigo, is that while he is really strong and he is definitely very fast, he's really lacking in the ability department, especially at this point in the series. He has basic things that'll let him get by in this battle. I mean, first and foremost, he's a Shinigami, meaning he's a spiritual being. That means that he cannot be seen by people that do not have spiritual awareness. He has a Zanpakuto, which literally cuts the soul of his opponent, so he can bypass their durability and attack the soul directly. If they were a good soul, they'll get to go to the Soul Society, so you can even say he attacks their soul directly. Even if their soul lives on, it gets cleansed and goes to the Soul Society. Or if they were a bad person, well, then I guess Hell King Jushiro is going to deal with them at that point. Or at least one of the Kushinado will try to deal with them. He also seems to have very good spiritual detection, which is a very weird thing that Kubo does. Like, he likes to say, oh, this character is really bad at sensing things, but then he has them do these really insane sensing feats. Like, Kenpachi is not supposed to have very good control over spiritual pressure, yet he's able to sense Yamamoto fighting Shunsui and Jushiro from like half across the Soul Society. Similarly, Ichigo's not supposed to have very good Ryatsu control, but he can sense the soul of a small child inside of a small paracrete half across the city. Like, his sensory ability is pretty insane. But that's really the basics for Ichigo. Let's move over to our boy Ikki over here. Now, our boy Ikki over here is not quite living up to Ichigo physically, as I was kind of alluding to earlier on in the video. Although he does have this really crazy, massive amping ability that might allow him to kind of fight on par with Ichigo, but we'll kind of talk about that in just a second. As far as his best AP feats are concerned, his little sister Shizuku performs this massive ice creation feat in her battle against Toka, who is the student council president lady of the anime, and this has actually been counted being town level. Although, again, this is technically not anime Ikki's cap, as we'll talk about in his abilities. But really, aside from that, there's not a whole lot of other stuff in the anime that's super impressive as far as AP is concerned. Speed is also very similarly pretty easy to do, as that same student council lady has the ability to manipulate and actually cuts lightning. I mean, she literally has the same feat as Kakashi, where she just mid-stroke is able to strike down lightning. You can argue that the announcers even say that she moves at the speed of light, but I think it's more consistent given her ability is lightning, and she's shown as being impressive because she can cut lightning, that them saying that she moves at the speed of light is a little bit of an outlier because they don't blatantly say speed of light. They say that she moves like light, something similar more to that, so we're going to go with lightning. And the reason this is impressive is that not only can Shizuku fight Toka, but Ikki, after being starved and tortured for like 17 days straight, is still able to have this fight with Toka, or not necessarily a fight. I don't want to spoil it for people that are going to go watch the series, but he does fight her and he does react and beat this lady. So he does actually react to the speed of lightning. And again, he can actually get faster than that. The main thing with Ikki though, is that he has some really OP abilities when he's in the same tier as somebody else, or when he's close enough to close the gap. The main ability he has in the series is called Itoshura, which amps his combat abilities more than tenfold, but is also said to amp it several dozen times. So basically, for the minute he's able to use Itoshura, he is at bare minimum 24 times stronger than his base, because I say several dozen times, which at bare minimum is going to mean 24 because it means numerous dozens, but at bare minimum that has to be 2 dozens, so 24 times. He has this ability called Perfect Vision, where he's able to read through his opponent's history and their future intentions. He also has this incredible Sixth Sense on that same note, where without even using Itoshura, he fights this character named Mock Greed, who is actually able to go faster than the speed of sound and such. And without using that OP amp ability, he just kind of uses his own precognition to react where she's going to attack and just completely react and dominate her throughout that entire fight. One of his main abilities is Blade Steel, which is kind of the same thing as Perfect Vision, except for that person's sword. So I mentioned that this verse kind of has Zanpakutos in a way. Instead of Shinigami, you have Blazers that are basically just magical knights instead of actually just being Shinigami death gods. So very similar in the way that their power system kind of works out. Although the Blazers, their stuff is comprised of both magic and the soul, so they have soul powers and magic powers for what it's worth. So if you're in a specific matchup where maybe you have a good magic shield, you could probably block their abilities, but then again, they also have the soul component, so it's a nice double whammy for their power system. But what his Blade Steel allows him to do is that as he fights with his opponent, he actually literally gets in their own head, finds out how they fight, and learns all of their abilities and how they'll deploy said abilities. So with his Perfect Vision and his Blade Skill, basically what he does is he scraps with you for a little bit, and then he pretty much gets a perfect read on your character, and then he just outskills you for the rest of the fight. Now, take this next part as you will, but he fights against Samurai Lady is what I'm going to call her, because I'm not even going to try to attempt her name, but she's the Samurai Lady that deals with the manipulation of wounds and is able to cut through space. It is actually said that she uses the concept of wounds as her ability, and Ikki is able to overcome her in that fight, so take that for as you will. I mean, if you want to say that this means that all of the different Blazers have conceptual abilities since they're all able to kind of fight against each other, that Ikki was able to fight against her ability, that means he has some kind of conceptual AP or conceptual defense. If you've read the light novel, they probably do get into that more. I have not, again, read the light novel, but they do at least say this in the anime, so take that for how you will. That maybe he has this conceptual power floating around, or just a resistance to conceptual abilities. But finally, the main ability that I was talking about earlier, where he can massively amp himself, is called the Man-Eating Demon. It's called Ito something again. I can't pronounce the second part because it's some weird Japanese word, so we're just going to call it its English name, Man-Eating Demon, where he literally just does this big, massive one-shot technique where he gets at bare minimum 200 times stronger. As they say, he gets many hundred-fold times stronger, so at bare minimum 200 times, likely much higher. And he does some big one-shot technique. Like, it's literally like he takes in all of that power, shatters his own limits, and then obliterates whoever he's fighting. Now, keep in mind, the reason I say it's likely higher is that the first time he used it was when he was deprived of like food, sleep, and was basically mentally tortured for 17 days. And at that point, it was still only 200 times at bare minimum, many hundredfold. So it's likely a bit higher than what I'm making it out to be because of the conditions that he actually used it in. It's like Ichigo's first Bankai appearance is probably not going to be as good as his second Bankai appearance because the first time he uses Bankai, he's heavily fatigued, he can barely handle it, but in future showings with his Bankai, he has much more control over it. Or when Ichigo first uses his Holification, he's barely in control of it, and he can only use it for like 6 seconds, but as he uses it more and more, it gets stronger and stronger, and he has more and more control over it. But who would win this battle? So here's kind of how this fight has to go down. Bankai Ichigo is too strong for Ikki to handle at large mountain level. Even if Ikki tries to speed blitz over, being 200 times faster than the speed of lightning would actually put him in the speed of light ranges. Even if he tries to blitz over and cut Bankai Ichigo while his guard is down, the fact is that 200 times at bare minimum is not good enough for him to go from town level to large mountain level. The gap is just far too massive. If you wanted to argue that maybe the hundreds of times was like 900 times, then maybe you actually do have Ikki cracking into that tier, and if you really are super charitable to him, then maybe, yeah, he could just 900 times his base form, he blitzes over, just chops Ichigo in half, and we call it a day. But that's not very likely. I mean, you have to be extremely charitable to assume the highest value of many hundredfold, and assume that it's like 900 times instead of the bare minimum, and the more casual, safe assumption that it's like 200 times. Even if it's like 300 times, it's still not enough, by the way. So even if you're like still being conservative but a little charitable, it's still not enough. So realistically, what has to happen is Ikki has to kill Ichigo while he's in base. But the problem is that Ikki is never going to jump to this technique. They're probably going to scrap for a little bit, and Ichigo's probably just going to kill him. Because even base to base, Ichigo at bare minimum is like 5% the speed of light, whereas Ikki over here is like around the speed of lightning, arguably at this point in the series without the man-eating demon technique. So yeah, that's a little bit of a yikes. And then keep in mind, his Bankai is only 10 times stronger than his base form, so even if you only believe that Bankai Ichigo only surpasses Shikai Toshiro with his Bankai, his Shikai would only be 10 times weaker than that. So still, there would still be the problem where Ichigo might just swing his sword once and kill Ikki. But if we equalize their stats, then it's a bit of a different story, because then at that point, Ikki just kind of outskills Ichigo and just murks him. Because the whole thing that Ichigo has going for him here is that he has a really nice stat advantage over Ikki that is kind of stonewalling him, and most importantly, he is just too strong for Ikki to really do any major damage to. But if you equalize the stats with the perfect vision, the ability to get inside his opponent's head, and the ability to predict into the future what moves they're going to make, on top of Ikki's extensive history of being a master swordsman, he's just going to outskill Ichigo and beat him. But again, that requires us to equalize the stats, which I think is a little unfair for someone like Ichigo, who's very reliant on just having very, very big stats and being really, really strong. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. What do you guys think of this matchup? Again, you can leave your thoughts in the comments down below about future matches that you guys want to see as well. I'd like to do more Bleach versus videos because, we are a Bleach hub over here, so we should probably do more Bleach versus videos, right? So with all that being said, you guys have yourselves a nice day, and maybe I'll actually come back, read the light novel, and we'll do a rematch. How about that? I know there's people that really like Chivalry. I really enjoyed it. I recommend you go, watch the anime. I think it's really good. Maybe I'll read the visual novel, we'll come back, and we'll have a rematch, because I heard he gets really OP in the visual novel. So maybe it'll be a bit of a better match. We don't really have to equalize the stats or anything, but who knows? I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace, late, guys.